Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All persons having business before this honorable court are admonished to draw near and give their attention as this court is now sitting in special ceremonial session for the memorial of the Honorable Joel M. Flom. God save the United States and this honorable court. Please be seated.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're here today in a special ceremonial session to remember our late colleague and dear friend, Circuit Judge Joel Flom, a shining light in the law and in the legal community here in the Seventh Circuit and beyond. Thank you all for joining us today to help celebrate Judge Flom's extraordinary contributions to our court, to our circuit, and to the federal judiciary. On behalf of the court, I extend a special welcome to Judge Flom's wife, Delilah Flom, son Jonathan Flom, daughter Allison Flom, and son-in-law Paul Schumann, former daughter-in-law Lisa Flom, and grandchildren Eli, Jackson, Lionel, and Lucy. I hope I got that all in the right order. Several of Judge Flom's closest friends will share some personal reflections with us today, as will three of my colleagues. To all of you here in the courtroom with us today, and many more in the overflow room and listening online, we're grateful for your presence here this morning in memory of Judge Flom. As this outpouring of attendance attests, there is no one in this legal community who was more respected, admired, and beloved. Judge Flom's 50-year tenure as a district and circuit judge reflects the depth of his commitment to the federal courts. In his remarkable 5 decades of service, he had a profoundly positive and lasting impact on the administration of justice and the legal culture in this circuit and on the national judiciary as well. It's not possible to capture Judge Flom's lifetime of dedicated public service in just a few short minutes, so I will begin by touching on the highlights, and then we'll call on our speakers to fill in the rest. Judge Flom earned his law degree in 1964 at Northwestern University and spent the first chapter of his professional life as a prosecutor, first in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office and then in the Illinois Attorney General's Office. In 1972, he moved to federal service as First Assistant United States Attorney in the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Chicago. 2 years later, President Ford appointed him to the district court bench, where he served for 8.5 years until his appointment by President Reagan to this court in 1983. Judge Flom served as an active circuit judge for more than 37 years and another 4 as a senior circuit judge. His many and varied contributions to the law can be found in his more than 2,000 published opinions at this point. Each one celebrates and reflects his deep commitment to the rule of law and the dignity of every person before the court. Each one is learned, thoughtful, and articulate. And there is another important quality to a Judge Flom opinion. He had a talent for explaining the court's reasoning in a calm and fair-minded way that promoted public understanding and acceptance of the court's judgment. Judge Flom's many off-the-bench contributions to the administration of justice include his leadership positions within the judicial branch, most notably his 6 years as Chief Judge of the Circuit and as a member of the Judicial Conference of the United States, and his service on the conference's executive committee and later on the Judicial Conduct and Disability Committee. To all of these leadership positions, he brought his impeccable judgment, his exceptional tact, and his unwavering commitment to preserving the independence of the judiciary and public confidence in our system of justice. Less visible are Judge Flom's contributions to strengthening our legal community and culture, and especially his many roles, both formal and informal, in educating, supporting, mentoring, and inspiring those who served in the legal profession and the judiciary. For years, he taught law students as an adjunct professor at Northwestern. He also taught criminal and military law as an officer in the JAG Corps in the United States Navy Reserve. More informally, but no less importantly, Judge Flom set an example for the bench and bar in our circuit and was a personal mentor to scores of law clerks, lawyers, and judges. You'll hear more about that from our speakers today. It's enough for me to say that Judge Flom's life and work both exemplified and sustained a culture of collegiality in the judiciary and civility in the legal profession. Joel set the gold standard and promoted these indispensable virtues. That so many judges and lawyers look to him for advice and support is a testament to the character and quality of his leadership, to his generosity of spirit and willingness to share his abundant knowledge, experience, and wisdom for the greater good of our justice system. Judge Flom's life of exceptional public service strongly influenced those of us who were lucky enough to work closely with him, whether as law clerks, fellow judges, lawyers, or court staff, for any period of time in the long arc of his career. I was graced with more than 20 years of his friendship and wise counsel, and I learned a great deal from his daily example of distinguished service. It was a joy and a great blessing to me. I think I speak for all of us in saying that he is, and always will be, very much missed. I'll turn now to our speakers to share their reflections. First up is Samuel Skinner, Joel's longtime dear friend, dating back to their days in the 1970s in the U.S. Attorney's Office here in the Northern District of Illinois. Sam Skinner served in that office for 7 years, including as the United States Attorney, followed by a stint in private practice, then service in the administration of President George H.W. Bush as Transportation Secretary and White House Chief of Staff. He returned to Chicago in 1993 as a corporate and law firm executive in a succession of different leadership roles. But for almost 2 decades now, he has been of counsel at the Greenberg Traurig law firm. Mr. Skinner.
Thank you, Chief Judge. May it please the court. I'm a little embarrassed. I'm going to have to turn my back to you. My first appearance here in this beautiful room. This is a spectacular room with all this that's around here. It is a special place, and we're honoring a special man. But my first appearance was right out of law school, was before Judge Campbell. Chief Judge Campbell was chief judge for some 20-some years, 30 years, in the court for a long time, very tough, very strict. And this was my first case as an assistant U.S. attorney. I was scared to death, nervous. This was my first case. I'd never been in a courtroom before, really. And it was a civil case, because at that time the assistants did civil and criminal cases, both. And it was a civil case I came up to watch get in a continuance. So I said, Assistant United States Attorney Samuel K. Skinner, on behalf of the government, Judge. He said, I'd like a continuance. I'm new to the office. And he said, granted. Then he called me on a sidebar. He said, Mr. Skinner, you're new to the office, aren't you? And I said, yes, sir, I am. This is the first time I've ever been before the court, any court. He said, good luck. And then he said, welcome to the court. Well, I can't think of a better place than this to recognize Judge Flom. And this is a celebration of life. His picture's on the wall, but the one I like is the most that you've all seen, this great smile of Judge Flom as a person and as a human being. Now I lost it already. So Judge St. Even, I've had a debate who's going to lose it first. I lost it. But it is. And I want to talk about not his role as a judge, because he'll be doing that or anything else. I want to talk about his role as a friend and as a first assistant United States attorney. Now, I met Joel first in 1971, 54 years ago. And he became a big part of my life ever since. He became a role model, a leader, a friend, and a dear friend, and a confidant. Jim Thompson had just become United States attorney, went on to be governor, and Jim and I had been assigned to try a very important criminal case in this courtroom, and Jim was going to try it with me, and it was going to be a long trial, and we knew that we were going to be contained with that thing, so we needed someone, or he needed someone, to come in and run the office while we were in trial in this very long case that took 7 weeks to try. And he said, it's going to be Joel Flom. And he said, "It's clear to me that the new first assistant is going to have to be responsible while we're gone for ensuring the office continue its growth and reputation as we prepared for trial." He'd been a first assistant attorney general, outstanding reputation as a lawyer, state prosecutor, and administrator. In my opinion, Jim Thompson's decision to put him as first assistant was the best decision he ever made as U.S. attorney. That's how important it turned out to be. He brought with him reputation, of course, of experience, reputation, extraordinary judgment. Within a day, it was clear to all of us that Joel was special. He just wasn't somebody. And he was a person that the assistants went to talk to. He was the man to see. He was the person to see if you had personal or professional questions or advice. That's who you went to, Judge Joel Flom. Not judge at the time, but first assistant Joel. And he gave the best advice. The meetings weren't short. He gave you, as you all know, the guy could talk with the best of them. I thought I was good, but he is the best. But that was what they needed. And the young assistants challenged, and that's what the kind of advice they got. It doesn't surprise you. But what does probably surprise you is that he was not only instrumental in monitoring and mentoring young assistants, he was also instrumental in recruiting the very best lawyers we could get. And that was very important because when I went into the office in '68, the office was all white males with a sponsorship from some ward. I came in as an unsponsored person from Lake Forest, Illinois, through the back door with John Thorne. From that moment on, though, when Judge Bauer came in from then on, everybody and anybody had an opportunity to apply for a job and get a job and be an assistant U.S. attorney. And Joel was instrumental in that because he knew what was important. And he, along with the team, recruited the very best lawyers in the country. We had the best office in the country. I don't care what the Southern District says, we were the best. Anybody that knew that, we were the best. That's who the Justice Department went to. When the Justice Department, the Attorney General needs someone to deal with a case of a governor or vice president in trouble, they called Joel and Jim Thompson to go out and help them. That's the kind of reputation our office had. But I thought I went to 5 of those people that were recruited became United States attorneys throughout the country. 7 became district court judges. Some of them are on the wall right here, and you all recognize them. 1 became a United States senator. 3 became chairman of major law firms. If I got these pages right. Got a little nervous here, I guess. And most importantly, in addition to that, the additional ones that came were people that became directors of the Illinois State Police, and 1 became the Attorney General of Illinois, and 1 went to Washington. But an important role in that was Joel played, and I don't think anybody fully understood this, he was a guiding light in presenting to the public the first public protection section of a U.S. Attorney's Office in the country, and they dealt with the issues of excessive force and discrimination. And he took individual lawyers and put them in that with great pride. It was led by one of your own, Judge Rovner, who was the chief of that operation. That program was, well, all we did was work with the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, in dealing with major problems. Some of those problems were criminal in nature and trying police officers, and others on excessive force. Others were employment discrimination. And we were of counsel and led on that effort. Chicago Police and Chicago Fire Department were litigated with. We litigated with them and got consent decrees. And when you see an officer in the Chicago Police Department who's of color, a woman, or anything else, that's because those 2 cases that Judge Flom and others worked on presented to the courts first. Judge Prentice Marshall has settled the case. And I think that it's hard to describe how important that was because he had in his mind, I'm going to get the very best lawyers, and they're going to be diverse, and they are going to be women, and they are going to be give every person the opportunity to provide and represent the United States of America. And he did that. And at the end, we had the best office in the country with the exception of District of Columbia for those lawyers who were working with us. I think after 2 years, Senator Percy recognized that and decided that it was time for Joel to become a United States District Judge at the age of 38, 36. I'm not sure what it was, but it was young. At the time, we called him the baby judge because he was the youngest judge, I think, in the history of the country. Little did we know, but we knew that worked with him knew he was going to be a game changer. Joel administered the oath of office to me twice, once as transportation secretary and once as chief of staff. At the Department of Transportation swearing in, my mother was there, and she met Joel for the first time. Now, when she met Joel, all of a sudden, I find my mom talking to Joel, and they're talking nonstop. And they are getting to know each other like nobody. And by the end of the conversation, they were best friends. And only Joel could have done that, by the way. My mom was intimidated by being there. He made her feel comfortable. He talked about her. And afterwards, she said to me, you know, I think he's a good man. Well, that meant something to me because the only other time she said that to me was when I joined IBM out of University of Illinois, and I went to phase 1 training, and I came home to tell my mother, I sat next to this man named Harrison Staines, Mom, he's smart. He, Princeton graduate, a naval officer for 5 years. And she said, I know his parents, he's smart, stay next to him. And that's what I did with Joel Flom. And I cannot tell you how much he meant, because he had all the tributes that everybody wanted, but we're kind of we're aggressive in that office. We needed someone to bring perspective. And you as first assistants played that role, and he played it, but he personally mentored. We became dearly friends, and we talked about everything. And he tried cases. He led the office. He did a little bit of everything, and he was very proud of it. But what is a good man? It was my mom talking about he's a good person. He was a great person. And just think about these 10 traits. I went on the internet, AI, I've got 10 points now, that everybody thinks are great. So I think they're pretty good too. But I think they define Judge Flom. Now, you understand when he came to the office, we all went by last names. So if I skip and say Flom, it will mean not out of disrespect. That's the way we talked about you. Valukas, Webb, Skinner was Flom. But Judge Flom had integrity. Never once did anybody ever question his integrity and anything and everything he handled. And he was at the standard. He was respectful. He respected everybody. I don't care who you were. He respected everybody. If you met you and he saw you, he loved you. United States Marshals, clerks, people and things, everybody he respected and loved as a person, and he wanted to know all about them. He was kind. I mean, I never heard him issue a bad word, and he's always, whenever you go to him and you're getting tough, he said, well, let's put a little kindness into the decision-making here. What's the right thing to do? That's the way he was. Fabulous listener. Fabulous listener. If he can outdo me, I'm not a very good listener, but he is a great listener. And that meant a lot to all of us. I think the clerks know that very well, because at the end of the day, they sat around and talked about anything and everything. And that's what you did when you were with Judge Flom. You talked about it. He was humble. He's a humble human being. I mean, he had it all. I mean, he's the best of the best of the best. And yet, he's humble. He never flaunted it in any way. He was loyal to his clerks, loyal to his friends, loyal to everybody else. He always, when you talked about him, it was never in any negative comments about anybody. It was always positive. He would always tell you, you're the best. He said, you're the best U.S. attorney. Well, Jim Thompson may have been pretty good too. But that's Joel telling you and making you feel good about yourself. He was steady as a rock. Man, he was non-judgmental. He listened to everybody, and he was appreciative. And I'll just tell you one story about that. I tried a case, and I thought it was a sure case. It came back, and I was not guilty. And I went to see the judge, not Judge Flom, another judge who tried the case, and I was distraught. And the judge said, it's better, Sam, to let 9 guilty people go instead of convicting 1 innocent man. And I thought about that. He said, that's the standard that we have. So I went down to Joel, and Joel just looked at me and said, he's right, you know. He's right, you know. So everywhere Joel went, people loved him. He related whenever, and you needed anything, he would be there. He'd answer the phone, he would talk to you as long as it was necessary, and he'd talk about anything and everything. Our conversations were very interesting. when they were just between the two of us. Total confidentiality. We talked all about you, by the way. We talked about many of you. None of you will learn anything about what he said and I said, but it was all good. It was all positive, by the way. But a few weeks before he left us, he got the Devitt Award at the Supreme Court. And I was fortunate to be there. It was a very, very moving. At the Supreme Court, the #1 federal judge in the country. I mean, they don't make too many of those in a year. Won, and he got that award. And he was there, and you could see the love that was there in the room, at the love with the judges and the Supreme Court. We're talking about baseball with Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. We're talking about hockey. And Joel was there and getting recognition. But after the reward ceremony, we ended up at dinner together. I ended up getting to sitting next to Judge St. Eve. And I'd not really met St. Eve. I knew her by reputation. All good. And we immediately started to talk about Joel Flom. And we talked about her all dinner. And it was a long dinner, by the way. It was a very long dinner on a big table. And so we talked about Judge this, Joel did that, and we could have talked all night. That is the demonstration after that night. It brought to me, I'm not the only one. Everybody feels that way about him. He was that way with everybody, and everybody felt about him, and they had a conversation. They didn't want the call to go off. They didn't want to hang up. Name me anybody that ever hung up on Judge Flom. Nobody hung up on him. You couldn't if you tried. But as I said, when we said the things are so, but he wanted to talk about his state, the country, world, what's going on. His love for this country was absolute. Absolute. And he wanted to say he's proud to serve as public servants. He was especially proud of his service as an officer and judge advocate of the United States Navy. Now, by the way, they don't make too many of those without going through the regular program, but he was drafted by the adjutant, Captain Wist, then Admiral Wist, to become one of them. And he went in, he was there for 13 years. And he was very proud of his service in the Navy. He had all Navy gear. And for those with the Marshal Service, he also had a lot of Marshal gear. He loved the U.S. Marshals, so he would wear the Marshal gear or he'd wear Navy gear. Now, I'm an Army guy, so we got along perfectly, but we would argue at great lengths and about that. But it always ended with laughs and joking and silly. And we then had to the end of it. Favorite day was 4th of July at Lake Geneva, where we could celebrate our country. We could celebrate it with great joy, with fireworks. We stood, we laughed, we joked, and we cried sometimes, actually, about our nation, how lucky we were. Now, before I go one final thing, I want to say his friends and his family were everything to him. That's what we talked about. He loved you. I know more about hockey than I ever wanted to know. I knew more about what's going on at the law school than I ever wanted to know. Not really. But he was very proud of his family. And Delilah is a unique partner in his life for so many years, who did so much for him and cared for him so much. Thank you. Well, today we salute him. And as hard as this is for me to say, because I'm an Army guy, he always would tell me, I outrank you. I said, you always outrank me. I was an assistant, you were first assistant. You're a district court judge, I'm not a judge. You're thinking, he said, I outrank you. I'm an 04 and you're an 03. You're an 03 armor officer and I'm an 04 judge. I said, okay, yes, sir. And then we saluted each other. Well, today, I say with this, we all salute him, what he was and what he did. Go Navy.
Thank you very much, Sam. Next, we'll hear from Daniel Webb, another longtime dear friend of Joel's from their time together in the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Chicago. Dan served in that office for more than 15 years. He was one of those aggressive prosecutors that Sam mentioned, I think. Legend has it. He also served as the U.S. Attorney for a few years after Sam Skinner had that role. He enjoyed notable success in prosecuting public corruption cases, and so several sensitive special counsel assignments followed. But for many years now, he has been a partner at the Winston & Strawn law firm here in Chicago and is the firm's co-executive chairman. Mr. Webb.
May it please this honorable court, and let me take the opportunity, if I might, just for a second. I cannot tell you how much it means to me to have been invited by all of you to speak. He was one of my closest friends, and I am so honored that you allowed me the opportunity. Thank you very much for that. And to all of you as friends and his family, and you're all here, and I'm going to share some personal memories with you. Yes, Joel was one of the closest friends I ever had in my life. So I think what I do, I'm going to bookend it. I'm going to start with the beginning, tell you a couple reflections, and then I'm going to go to the end. I don't think we should be afraid of talking about the end, and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to focus on one character trait, which I think is great for a judge, is actually good judgment. Flom, throughout his career, and I built up such a close bond because no matter what I would be talking to him about, whether it be personal, legal, about our friends, issues, politics, government, Flom had an extraordinary ability to just use basic judgment and wisdom to somehow analyze disparate facts and circumstances being presented to him and tell you what might be the right way to deal with that. And that's an extraordinary trait to have. So let me do that, and let me start with the beginning. The beginning goes this way. I think it's 1973 or so. I was a farm kid from Southern Illinois, and I'd found my way into the U.S. Attorney's office trying to learn how to do this thing called trying cases. And I'd been there a couple of years, and Thompson brought Flom on to be the first assistant. I think he pirated him from Bill Scott, who was the Attorney General at that time. And Flom shows up as the first assistant United States Attorney. And I got to know him a little bit, but not great. And one day, Thompson walks into my office, as he often did, throws his feet up on my desk, and he says, "Webb, I want you to take the kid up to court with you." And I said, "Who?" And he said, "Flom. I want you to take Flom up to court with you. You're trying this." We indicted a bunch of aldermen and public officials back in those days, and I was getting ready to go to trial in a case called the Paul will go to case. You wouldn't have heard about it, but it was just years and decades ago. And I was getting ready to try an important case, and Thompson said, "Take the kid to court with you because he's never tried a case in federal court. He's a great trial lawyer, and you need to get to know him. And so do it." And I thought, oh my Lord, how could that possibly happen? That's wonderful. Little did I know, it was that decision by Jim Thompson that started this 50-year friendship. Amazing. I won't bore you with the details. We tried the case. We prepared the case for trial. We spent enormous amounts of time with each other, and it came time for closing argument. And Flom said, "What do you want to do?" I said, no, brother, you tell me what to do, okay? I'm not telling you what to do. I said, "All right, here's what we're going to do." He said, "Webb, you're going to be the barn burner. You're going to get up. You're going to talk to the audience. You're going to warm them up in the opening closing argument, and you kind of be yourself. And then I am going to be the wise man that comes back in rebuttal and pulls it all together and use judgment and my ability to persuade." And I said, "Deal." And that's what happened. We had problems in this case, not to bore you, we just had problems. And we got up, and I gave my closing argument, and I was not sure where this was going and what was going to happen. Flom got up in 1 hour, talked to those jurors, just used his own personality soft-spoken, wisdom, judgment. And I gradually watched him symbolically climb into that jury box. And they became his friend. They came to trust him. They came to rely upon the information he provided to them. And they wanted to vote his way. And you know what? They did. We won the case. And I just, afterwards, I told Flom, I said, the fact that I had the honor and the privilege of trying your first federal case here, I will never forget it. That developed a friendship that did last 50 years, and a very close friendship. I constantly would be meeting with him one-on-one over the decades, just to get together. Mostly it was just he and I. We would just go out and we'd have lunch somewhere and nobody else there. I can remember shortly after that trial, by the way, I remember another event that I'll share with you quickly. I know I got time issues because I have 3 judges following me, so I've got to be wise enough to appreciate that. So we go out to a lunch. I called him up and said, I want to have lunch. I'd been in the office 3 years. By the way, some of you who know me, I am not a patient person. I like to keep moving. I like to see what the next experience of life is going to be for me. So I took him out to lunch, just he and I, at a place called Burgos, right next door to the federal building. We sat there and we talked, and after a few minutes I said, I got to tell you something. I'm leaving. He says, you're what? I said, I'm leaving. I think I've learned a fair amount here in 3 years, and I want to move on, ... He leaned across the table. He said, I want you to listen very carefully to me. Do you understand what we have in this office? Would you walk down the hallway and just read off the names of the people on the doors that Bauer, Thompson, and Flom have brought into this office? You're never going to have a group of people that you have an opportunity to build up a bond and a friendship and a relationship with that will last you for your life. And why, Webb? Because of your impatience to walk out the door now, you will not have had time to do it. And I tell you right now, if you listen to me and you follow my advice and you stay 2 or 3 more years, I wager you right now, someday you will thank me for this. And I did exactly what he told me to do. I followed his advice. I stayed 3 more years. And yes, I built up relationships with people that became the closest friends for the last 50 years. These same people that I had the privilege of working with in that office under their leadership, and I could rattle off the names, but we're not going to do it, but they were an extraordinary group of people that Thompson, Flom, and Bauer had brought together under one roof, and those bonds have lasted me up until today, and I'll never forget that advice and the opportunity that he gave me. That was the beginning. Yes, for 50 years, we continued with that frequently. Get together, go out, just have lunch, talk about things, no one else present. We did it every 3 or 4 months. So I'll go to the end. I think it was I think it's last October. I'd been calling Delilah up once, so I wanted to get together with him. But he wasn't getting out very much, and he was on dialysis. So, so Delilah calls me and said, I'm leaving town for a day. Call him up. Just go up there and see him. Just go up to the appointment. I said, yes. So she left. I don't know where you went. You went somewhere. I went up, called him up, said, I'm coming up. He said, fine, come on up. The kids aren't here either. So I went up to the apartment. We spent 3 or 4 hours just doing what we always do. Sitting in the room, talking about friends, family, issues, politics, life. And it was time to leave. And I kind of said, you know, Joe, I got to get back. And he said, before you go, listen to me. He says, I never wanted to do this. I always said I would never do this. I've never lived on a machine in dialysis. I wouldn't do it. And now I'm still doing it. And he said, the SOBs are now trying to move me from 2 days of dialysis to 3. And I don't want to do it. So I tried to use my greatest skills, selfishly, using my greatest skills of advocacy, to say to him, please, no. People live on dialysis for years. Come on, don't. And he looked at me and he said, that's not me. So I hugged him at the door. I had this melancholy sadness, but then I saw him again. It was a month later. It was the Devitt Award in D.C. I was invited. It was a wonderful evening. Sam's described it. It was just a great, fabulous evening. Speakers got up and shared their remembrances of Flom, and it just made me feel great. In fact, I had this hope that this is a turning point. And so anyway, but it was a fabulous evening, and Joe was strong, and it just was a great evening. So, a month later, 1st of December, Delilah calls me and says, I just left him. We're in Wisconsin in a hospital. Complications have arisen. And she said, he just told me what we're doing. And he told me, I'm going out like Ted Williams, a winner. And he said, I'm making the decision, nobody else. I'm making the decision. And he did. Planned out the funeral. Get the details while he's still there. And then 2 days in hospice, he passed away. And so, as I get a chance to say goodbye to him now at this ceremony, so all I can say is thank you very much for giving me the privilege of being here. And Joel, someday I'll be up yonder and we'll have more conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We'll hear next from Gary Feinerman, who is well known to most of you in this courtroom as a district judge in this courthouse for a dozen years. He clerked for Judge Flom in the early 1990s, then went on to clerk for Justice Kennedy, and eventually returned to Chicago for private practice. He also served in state government as the Illinois Solicitor General. In 2010, President Obama appointed him to the district court here in the Northern District of Illinois, where he served with great distinction until just about 2 years ago. He is currently a partner at the Latham & Watkins law firm. Gary.
Chief Judge Sykes, judges of the Seventh Circuit, district judges, magistrate judges, bankruptcy judges of the Northern District of Illinois, honored guest, it's my privilege to join you all here today for this really sad but wonderful occasion. I first met Judge Flom in late 1989 when, as a 24-year-old 2L, I interviewed for a clerkship. Other than a couple of Lake County traffic court judges I crossed paths with years earlier, the only other judges I had ever encountered were the handful with whom I had interviewed in the prior weeks. Back then, the interviewing cycle was a lot quicker than it is nowadays under the plan. So I arrived at the Dirksen building with settled expectations of what I would face, a relatively formal affair in which the judge's assistant would escort me into a conference room where the judge from behind a large wooden desk would probe me on jurisprudence, after which I would spend time with the judge's clerks, who would remain guarded about the job and how they were enjoying their year. Well, you know what's next. That's not at all how things went. I was greeted warmly by Janie and Sharon, the judge's assistants. Judge Flom came out of the conference room, greeted me warmly with a warm handshake. He took me through the conference room, past the large wooden desk, and into his study. And what struck me was aside from the Lincoln memorabilia and those wonderful World War I posters, the tables and the bookshelves and the walls were covered by photos of Judge Flom's friends and colleagues and above all, his family, his mom, Delilah, John, and that larger-than-life photo of Allie in his study, which many of us saw. I don't think we talked at all about the law during the interview. Instead, Judge Flom asked me about me, where I grew up, which sports teams I rooted for, the job I had between college and law school, what I like to do in my spare time, and my family. And without my asking, he shared with me a bit of his history, growing up in Hudson, being a lifelong public servant, his understanding of the role that courts play in our government and society. And he mentioned, not for the first time, the Burkean notion that you can't turn a battleship on a dime. And of course, he talked about his family. And there was something instantly familiar and instantly familial about Judge Flom. And after 45 minutes, it was as if we had known each other our entire lives, or at least that's how I felt. I then met the clerks. I saw Bruce Braun. I know he's here. And what they said differed from what I had heard from the clerks in the other chambers that I had visited. They described not only an unparalleled learning experience, but also an incredibly warm and supportive chambers environment, a mentor beyond measure. They said that they could not imagine ever having as good a job as the one they currently held. So when Judge Flom called a couple weeks later to offer me a job, I accepted without hesitation. And his decision to hire me was a blessing that set the trajectory of my life. And when I say that, I don't just mean the lines on my resume, though he had a lot to do with a lot of those lines. During that year and the decades that followed, he taught me so much, among which he taught me how to live in the law, and he told me how to live in life. He knew the law cold, but what I mean, among the things that I mean, is that he was always the model of judicial temperament, of integrity, wisdom, civility, restraint, and love. He always made time for me. He always gave me his full attention. There were those 2-hour lunches. I don't think I've ever had a 2-hour lunch with anybody other than Judge Flom, offering sound guidance and counsel in matters large and small, personal and professional. And he always cut to the heart of the matter. He focused me on what truly mattered, on how to be the best lawyer, colleague, friend, mentor, person that I could be. He made me and Beth feel like family. He did the same for countless others at various critical junctures of all of our lives. The examples are legion, and they would fill several volumes. Throughout my career, I always strive to live up to the example that Judge Flom set, and I've fallen short more times than I care to admit. And whenever I did, I felt that I had let him down somehow. But he was always my North Star, always. And whatever successes I've enjoyed, whatever good I've managed to do, it was due primarily to his steadfast presence and guidance in my life. In 2009, I interviewed with Senator Durbin in Washington in the hopes of becoming a district judge. I wanted to follow in his footsteps because I wanted to be him. Senator Durbin asked me who my hero was, and I asked if I could name 3, and he said, okay. And without hesitation, I said Abraham Lincoln, Steve Feinerman, who's my father, and Judge Flom. And a half second later, fearing that I might have blown the interview, I said, Senator, I realize that 2 of my 3 heroes are Republicans. And he replied without skipping a beat, that's okay, Gary. Those two are more than all right in my book. If there was one thing on which Judge Flom and I did not see eye to eye always, it was politics. He, of course, never let his politics affect his jurisprudence, but he was a close student of, and he loved talking about and debating politics. And we had some great discussions over the years through presidencies and eras. And, you know, looking back by contemporary standards, it was really very, very quaint. Everybody here knows Judge Flom, and for those of you who know me as well, it won't surprise you that we fought our incredibly pitched battles between the 40-yard lines and well inside the hash marks. Above all else, Judge Flom was an institutionalist, a patriot, a firm believer in the constitutional order. I wish I could ask him for guidance, for counsel, to make sense of the historical moment that we're now in, where those urging defiance of the judiciary are not limited, as they were in the 50s and the 60s, to private agitators and a handful of revanchist governors. He would have offered insight and wisdom, and along with it, comfort that all would somehow work out. You know, now that he's gone, it's something that I now have to figure out for myself. And I know that Judge Flom, over the course of 35 years, offered me the tools to do so. And my only hope is that I was paying enough attention when he offered me those tools. The last time I saw Judge Flom was the last time that Dan and Sam saw him, was in the Great Hall of the Supreme Court 3 weeks before he died. The Chief Justice had just bestowed upon him the Devitt Award in a beautiful ceremony in the courtroom. Sam and Dan talked about it. For those of you unfamiliar, the Devitt Award is essentially the Lifetime Achievement Award for federal judges. One's given out every year. I think I saw Judge Williams is a recipient. There are probably recipients sitting here in this courtroom, future recipients sitting here in this courtroom right now. And the award was made for the likes of Judge Flom, and it was long overdue. Justice Kennedy, Justice Barrett, Judge Dow had offered warm and moving tributes. And Judge Flom, though struggling with a great deal of pain and discomfort, he stood at the lectern for several minutes, accepted the honor, speaking wisely and without notes, unlike me, to what the judiciary and what the legal system meant to him. He spoke movingly of his own history and upbringing. He spoke lovingly of his family. And he did his level best, as was his wont, deflect the well-deserved praise that had just been sent his way. We then went to the Great Hall with its high ceiling, majestic columns, marble busts of Chief Justices past, and what was easily, as Dan mentioned, the longest banquet table I had ever laid eyes on. And Judge Flom was seated in the center, and he was flanked by the Chief Justice and Justice Breyer and Justice Kagan and Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Barrett were nearby. And it was a fitting tribute to a giant in the law and our legal culture. But I know, as all of us here know, that what mattered most to Judge Flom at that moment was being surrounded by Delilah and Allie and Paul and the grandkids, by colleagues, present and past, and by dear friends. And that's the picture of how I will always remember him.
Thank you, Gary. Our colleague, Judge Alana Rovner, is next on our program, but she sends her deep regrets that she cannot be with us today. As you all know, Judge Rovner is a dear friend of Joel's for more than 50 years and his colleague on the court for more than 30 years. She did send her remarks that she had prepared for this memorial to me and asked me to read them on her behalf, and I'm honored to do so. I invite you to imagine in your mind's eye that it is Ilana and not me reading these remarks because they are very personal, so please close your eyes if you want to and think of her beautiful presence as you listen to her very heartfelt words about her dear friend, Joel Flom. Dearest Joel, here we all are in the courtroom in the building you loved for so many years, and every last person in the courtroom is missing you. Each one of us has a wonderful Joel Flom memory to share. These are some of mine. Our friendship began in 1972. From that time on, our families were intertwined. We spent holidays together and weekends at our country home and traveled together, notably to Wisconsin, where the children were campers. We were together in the happiest times, and we leaned on each other in the saddest. You and Delilah did not leave my side through the numerous times when Dick was in the hospital, and we tried our best to be as much comfort as possible during dear Ellen's illness and death. We knew each other's parents and loved them. And most of all, we came to really care about one another. I have so often reminisced about the day of my cancer surgery when I was on a gurney in the preoperative waiting room, and I opened my eyes and I saw standing before me two men. One was Dick, and the other was you. And you were both wearing the gray coats of a Northwestern hospital physician. On both of their coats, there was a name embroidered, and the name was the same, Dr. Richard N. Rovner. You, Joel, were swallowed up in Dick's spare doctor's coat, and the two of you were cheering me on. I can close my eyes and see both of you standing there shoulder to shoulder. How Dick ever smuggled you in is something I have pondered through the years. I remember how we celebrated when you were named to the bench. We called you the baby judge, and if there ever was a person who was meant to be a judge, it was you. You were a small-town boy from Hudson, New York, who worked from his youngest years to help his parents in their grocery store. And no matter where you went thereafter, you conquered every heart along the way. You did it with your intelligence, your wit, your thoughtfulness, and your integrity. We will always wonder where all of that wisdom and understanding of human nature came from. We marveled at it. There was never a problem too complicated for you to tackle. There was never a shoulder more available for others to cry on. And what fun it was to share humorous stories with you. We could often hear the peals of laughter as we passed your chambers. You took each new judge under your wing and gave us the best and most worthwhile advice to help us on our new paths. You were a mentor and a friend for life to your law clerks. You reveled in their accomplishments, and you had so much to revel in. What a beginning you gave to so many young lawyers. They are here today, Joel, thanking you for the time and effort you so freely offered them. There is no way to overstate the love and pride you had for Delilah. Your eyes lit up whenever she came into view. You showered your children and grandchildren with unconditional love. You gave each of them as much time as they needed. You never missed any activity that involved the children and grandchildren. I think of you cheering John on at the Saddle and Cycle Club hockey games, and how well I recall you shopping with Allie for her beautiful bat mitzvah dress, as you did on so many occasions. You would have moved heaven and earth for your family. I think of the day you arrived at our front door in full Navy officer regalia. When we opened the door, we were stunned. We had no idea that you were now also United States Naval Reserve Lieutenant Commander Joel Flom of the JAG Corps. You wanted to thank and serve your country, and you did. You were a proud and faithful member of our faith, and you embodied the tenets of Judaism: ethical living, social justice, compassion, treating others with dignity and respect, and giving of oneself to help those in need. I have pride in the fact that my name will always be attached to yours, for when you were elevated to the Seventh Circuit, I was designated to your district court seat. It does not seem possible that you are no longer walking the halls of the 26th and 27th floors of the Dirksen Federal Courthouse, stopping at the judge's chambers and in the clerk's office and the IT department to say, hello, how are you? And you meant that question because you really cared about the answers. You had time for whoever crossed your path, and each person felt your affection. You had so much of the charm of the small-town fellow that you had once been, and a genuine interest in everyone you came across, and that came across to everyone. So, old friend and beloved Joel, with gratitude and love, we say farewell. We miss you. We will always miss you. And finally, this morning, we'll hear from Circuit Judges Mike Scudder and Amy St. Eve, both of whom joined the court in 2018, on May 21st and May 23rd, respectively. Those 2 days matter only for institutions like the judiciary that organize themselves around seniority. Judges Scudder and St. Eve share the perspective of the countless lawyers and judges in this legal community who have observed and learned from Joel, and more recently had the great good fortune to work closely with him on the court. Judge Scudder.
Thank you, Chief Judge Sykes. I'm so honored to be here today to speak about my dear friend, Judge Joel Flom, and the legacy that he has left behind. Delilah asked Judge Scudder and I to both speak today, and Judge Scudder and I decided to do this together, given that we have walked together in our journeys with Judge Flom over the past 7 years since we were confirmed to the Court of Appeals. I met Judge Flom almost 23 years ago when I became a district court judge. I did not know him before I became a judge, although I certainly knew of him, having worked in this building as an assistant U.S. attorney. You couldn't be in this courthouse without knowing about Judge Flom and his reputation. He was a legend. I was confirmed for the district court at the age of 36, and I looked young at the time, so somebody recommended go up and talk to Judge Flom and get some advice from him. President Gerald Ford had appointed Judge Flom to the district court in the Northern District of Illinois at the age of 38, and he looked so young, he was called the boy judge. And as Sam pointed out, you can look up there and see for yourself. So I went up to Judge Flom on the 27th floor of this building, and I walked into his chambers, and I said, "Hi, I'm the girl judge who's come for advice." A smile broke out on his face, and he welcomed me immediately. Little did I know at that time that this initial meeting was the beginning of 23 years of friendship, mentorship, kindness, wisdom, and lifelong lessons.
Thank you, Judge St. Eve. I too want to start with the first time that I met Judge Flom. On May 15th, 2018, the day after I was confirmed, I received a telephone call. It was Judge Flom. I'd long admired him, knew of his reputation, but had never met him. He congratulated me and invited me to come to his chambers the next day. And when I arrived, Judge St. Eve was there, and Judge Flom said he wanted to talk to us about how the court worked. I'll never forget the meeting. It went about 3 hours and included Judge Flom walking us around the court, introducing us to everyone we saw, and then sitting in his chambers and hearing him describe the many facets of how the court operates, and most importantly, his perspective on how it should operate. Not as a collection of individual judges, but as an institution. I remember walking back to Skadden Arps feeling blown away by Judge Flom's generosity and perspective. Here was a judge with a legendary reputation who had gone out of his way to welcome and teach his newest colleagues to share a very learned view on how best to integrate into the court, and even more, how to think about the court. Judge Flom did not have to do that, but the reason he did was clear. He wanted Judge St. Eve and me to hear first from him that judging is not about judges. It's about the judiciary as a third branch of our constitutional democracy, and indeed about the Seventh Circuit as an institution with a reputation for thought leadership, excellence, and civility. And so began a very close relationship for me, much like the one Judge St. Eve had with Judge Flom. I learned so much from him, often just by sitting in his chambers or going to lunch at the Union League Club. And in time, I came to think of Judge Flom as not only the best colleague anyone could have in any line of work, but as a mentor and a dear friend. And what I find unique about Judge Flom is how he could give so much of himself to so many of us, as my own experience with him was the furthest from unique. He was the same way to so many here today, to almost 50 classes of law clerks, to his fellow judges on this bench and all around the country, and to legions of lawyers across our circuit. I'm convinced that God called Judge Flom to be a judge so he could provide this example, so he could show us all the way.
Judge Flom grew up in Hudson, a small town of 8,000 in upstate New York. His parents owned a grocery store nearby. Judge Flom worked at that grocery store from the age of 7 until he graduated from high school. And while working in the store, his parents instilled in him a strong work ethic and a devotion to public service. Judge Flom set the example for all of us on both of those characteristics. After graduating from Union College and from Northwestern Law School, Judge Flom spent a short period of time in private practice and then entered a life of public service. Judge Flom had over 6 decades of public service, which he always felt was the highest calling. And as you have heard, he worked at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, the Illinois Attorney General's Office, and the United States Attorney's Office before President Ford appointed him to the District Court bench in Chicago. 8 years later, President Reagan appointed him to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, where he served for over 40 years. In 2020, Judge Flom took senior status. At that time, he was the country's longest tenured judge in active service, with over 45 years of service. His service placed him 10th on the all-time list of active service for Article III judges. During his almost 50 years of service as a judge, Judge Flom served an important mentorship role to so many of us and to so many of us in this room. I was blessed to be among those mentees. Judge Flom had a way about him in giving advice. He would usually start out by saying, "Have a seat," and he'd start out with St. Eve, usually followed by something teasing, and then a good lesson. I remember when I was on the district court bench and I got my first reversal from this bench. I wasn't very happy, and so I went up to see Judge Flom. And he said, "St. Eve, sit down." So I did, and he said, "All right, St. Eve, I know you've probably never gotten a B in your life. But getting reversed isn't getting a bad grade. You have to make hard calls, and other judges just might disagree. It's okay. Keep working hard and doing a good job. I know I'm a better person and a better judge because of those life lessons Judge Flom departed during the countless hours I spent in his chambers and the many lunches over at the Union Lake Club. He was one of the most wise and thoughtful people you would ever want to meet. The important role that he played for so many was recognized and honored in November. As you have heard, he received the Opperman Foundation's Devitt Distinguished Service to Justice Award, the highest honor bestowed upon an Article III federal judge for his lifetime of service to the judiciary. And at the time, he was surrounded by his loving family there and his close friends. What is particularly telling about that, though, is that every judge on this circuit and who previously served on this circuit signed a letter in support of his nomination, reflecting the respect that we all have for him.
I want to spend a few minutes on Judge Flom, the institutionalist. For so many today, institutionalism seems abstract, foreign, or bygone. None of this was true for Judge Flom, and I think he put his belief in the judiciary and our court as an institution into action in many different ways. He prized personal relationships. Whenever he saw you, he always started with the personal. How are you doing? I've been thinking about you. I've been worried about what you told me a week ago, and the like. There was no way to know Judge Flom and not bond with him. For 43 years, he displayed a master class in hallway diplomacy on the 26th and 27th floors of this courthouse. He was always checking in, always curious how you were coming along in your work, and deft in his ability to calm attention, persuade you to keep your mind open on an issue in a case, or encourage you to go see a colleague to work through something together. The paradox in all of this was that Judge Flom, the institutionalist beyond all institutionalists, cared very little for official court meetings and large group dialogue. He kept our court bonded through endless one-on-one dialogue, all rooted in personal connection. Judge Flom could find common ground within cases where agreement seemed beyond reach. I can remember a time in conference when two of us saw an issue in entirely opposite ways, with Judge Flom staying quiet, and after listening to a lot of disagreement, saying in that characteristic soft tone, "Well, I think we can work this out. I'll take the opinion and find a way to keep us all together." And he did just that, ultimately finding a very narrow path of reasoning that nobody was thrilled with, but everyone agreed with. Perhaps wisdom is the best description, for he understood the value of unity over division. Judge Flom saw the institution of the Seventh Circuit way beyond judges, too. And it's here in particular that I want to single out the admiration that he had for our staff, for his own judicial assistants, most recently Lori Insulaco, for everyone in our clerk's office, in our IT group, and so on. And he very much cherished our staff attorneys and knew how pivotal they were to our work. Indeed, in that first meeting I had with Judge Flom, he went out of his way to tell me how important it was for me in joining the court to reach out to our staff attorneys, to work closely with them, and to always support them. Good advice then, good advice now. In recounting all of this, all I know to say is what I'm sure is running through everyone's mind. Judge Flom was a gift and a teacher, someone who showed us the way.
I recently read Judge Flom's statements from his investiture to the district court, which took place over 50 years ago on January 21st of 1975. I want to share them with you, or some of them with you, because I think they reflect who he was. At his investiture, Judge Flom said, "I did not enter upon this judicial journey without certain preconceptions, and I would like to share just a few of those with you. I respect and revere the law and admire those who engage in this practice. and fully realize the significance of a concerned and conscientious judiciary. I am also fully aware of the privilege of performing public service, and in particular, serving in a high judicial office. I further acknowledge the need for a continuing reaffirmation of that trust at this crucial time in our nation's history. Thus, to the practicing bar and the public generally, I commit myself to be both a student and a servant of the law. Judge Flom went on to say, I would like to close by borrowing and paraphrasing a statement of one of our former presidents, President Truman, which I believe summarizes my personal view of high office. Speaking of that special trust and the inherent powers contained therein, he said in substance, everything, all of it belongs to the people. I am just privileged to exercise part of it for a while. That is all. And since it is only lent to me, I shall try to use it with great care so that I can pass it on to the next fellow in the best condition possible. Judge Flom, you used your trust and your power with great care on the court. And certainly, as President Truman said, you have left the court and the Chicago legal community in a better place. I know you're in a better place now, Judge Flom, but don't think we will ever forget you. Thank you for your friendship and your mentorship to so many of us. Thank you for setting the standard of excellence. Thank you for teaching us all how to be collegial and setting that standard by example. Thank you for setting the example by always discharging your duties with grace, humility, respect, and kindness. You are greatly missed, Joel, but you have touched the lives of so many people who will follow the path that you have lit.
These past few months have been difficult for us without Judge Flom. We loved him and we miss him. And in reflecting on why I feel such a loss, why I often hear that signature voice of his in my mind, I know it's because of his example. Example matters, and it matters as much today as ever. Judge Flom wrote the playbook on example. And when I think of his example, several qualities come to mind. He treated everyone as equals, from the CSOs to our housekeeping staff to his fellow judges. He knew everyone's name on the 4th floor of the Union League Club. And I'll never forget one of the waitresses there shedding a tear when we told her we lost him. She knew him like we knew him. He set the bar at excellence, and he worked hard to meet it, and when headwinds and complexities arose, as they always do, he recognized that we share much more common ground than may appear on the surface of almost every challenge. He never wanted a lawyer or a party to leave our courtroom without feeling, no, without knowing that they had their day in court. And the Flom recipe had 2 ingredients: decency and respect, every day with everyone. He was an idealist and a realist all at once. Judge Flom understood the many challenges that can accompany law and life, including the many ways life can present pain and loss. And he always knew precisely how to administer justice with just the right doses of understanding and compassion. I'll never forget him saying, "Scudder, when you write opinions, write them for the losing party. The winner will be thrilled they won, but it's how you explain the loss that matters more." He believed his own personal example, his own diligence, professionalism, civility, and compassion helped instill public confidence in the rule of law. Idealistic, yes, but chock full of the understanding that living a life of character and virtue can make concrete differences in the lives of others and our nation. Judge Flom loved being a federal judge, and our court and our country owe him beyond measure for the example he provided. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you to all of our speakers this morning for sharing such wonderful remembrances of Judge Flom. And thank you to the Flom family for joining us here today for this opportunity to celebrate and rejoice in all that your husband, father, grandfather gave to the law, to this court, to this circuit, and to the federal judiciary in the United States. We will miss him dearly, and we will always remember him. I would like to invite everyone to join the Flom family after court concludes this morning for light refreshments and a reception at the south end of the hallway just outside the door here. Thank you all very much for joining us today. The court is in recess.